Sure. So yes, I am Walid Rashidi. I'm an associate professor of communications at Cal State Fullerton. I primarily teach in the entertainment and tourism communications concentration, and one of my research specializations is looking at how users use music, how they experience music, and specifically with music formats. So I've done studies on cassette tapes, studies with streaming, studies with compact discs. And I'm kind of curious as to why particular groups of people, whether they are particular age groups, are interested in various types of physical music, especially in an era in which most people are now streaming music, or I should say most people, most young people perhaps are now
Mhm.
streaming music. And so I like to look at that and kind of get an idea as to what are people doing with some of the physical music collections that they have, or what are their interests surrounding using physical music. So when I mean physical music, I mean the physical formats like vinyl records, cassette tapes, and CDs primarily. And so I've done several studies that kind of connect with that. I've looked at studies about CD usage with younger populations. I looked at studies that examine what are happening with record stores and with the advent of streaming. How are they either competing, or how are they kind of joining forces in that sense?
Mhm.
I have also looked at studies with cassette tape usage via the millennial population, and what are their experiences and utility from using those types of media formats. So this particular study, what it looked at was we're kind of in this transition period. Some people are still using CDs. A lot of people are streaming. And I was curious to see, what are people doing with their CDs as they move into streaming. So I wanted to know what that experience was like in that transitional process, because this is a big shift in the
Mhm.
way in which we consume music, specifically recorded music. And I was very curious to see and to really kind of act upon this particular opportunity in which we
Mhm.
are starting to change, and we can see this shift happen before our very own eyes. So my opportunity here was really looking at, what are people doing with their CD collections? Are people still interested in compact discs? And as they move into streaming, what are they going to do with their CD collections?
Mhm.
What are their plans as far as using CDs or other physical music media in the future, as they start to kind of link further into this idea of streaming, whether it's on Spotify or Pandora or YouTube Music.
Mhm.
I prefer qualitative. I have been a qualitative researcher pretty much my entire professional career.
Really?
Um, I prefer it because I actually come from a journalism background. And
Mhm.
so for me, interviewing people, coming up with good questions, and also taking information from a variety of perspectives and trying to put it together in a cohesive report or format or study, or in journalism, an article, to me that comes naturally.
Mhm.
So because of my background as a journalist, and specifically a print journalist, I used to have to interview quite a few people and then come up with a story that kind of synthesizes all this information that I have received. I found that qualitative interviewing and coming up with questions and doing questionnaires and whatnot come
Mhm.
a lot more naturally to me than calculating a lot of numbers. That's
Mhm.
not to say that quantitative data is less
Mhm.
reliable or is not as strong per se. It's just that my inclination is to work on the qualitative side, because I like to talk to people about their experiences and get more detail about why do they do things and how do they go about it, and kind of dig a little further.
Mhm.
So for me, I've just found that qualitative research works well based on my experience. Yeah, I've talked to my students several times about using streaming media in general, uh,
Mhm.
whether it is streaming video or streaming audio. So
Mhm.
I do notice that their access to music is vast now, and that
Yeah.
is very helpful. Especially in some of my classes. I teach a class that's specifically about the music industry. So
Mhm.
it's a music industry class for communications majors. So I come in with the expectation that none of my students are performers. They're not instrumentalists or they're not vocalists. These are people who want to work as agents or publicists or work as
Mhm.
the management team or work in promotions or something of that nature. So what we do sometimes is we talk a lot about the new stuff that's coming out. We talk about things that are up ahead. I sometimes have them do these exploratory exercises in which I have them look for new artists and say,
Mhm.
jump online, go to Spotify, go to Bandcamp, go to all these, these portals online and find new music and share it with the class. And let's talk about these artists that you found. So a lot of that helps because, especially if I'm referring to certain artists, certain songs, certain albums,
Mhm.
they can just pull it right up on their computers or on
Mhm.
their phones. And I think that helps them get a reference point to some of the conversations and discussions that we're having.
Mhm.
So that can actually be a very useful tool, is having millions of albums or songs at your disposal can be really helpful. And then on top of that, I think a lot of them are able to kind of connect when the new whatever album drops. Again, the Taylor Swift
Mhm.
recently dropped Midnights, and so everybody was just
Yeah.
connecting right away on that. Oh, I
Uh-huh.
like this song, and I'm into that, and I'm into that. So this
Mhm.
happens quite a bit too, where they can socialize immediately because everyone has immediate access to the album the day it
Mhm.
hits, and
Yes.
that also is kind of a connection that streaming services have provided, that
Mhm.
otherwise, if you were out there just buying the physical record, whether it was a vinyl record or the cassette tape or the CD or whatever, a portion of the population wouldn't have access to that album. They wouldn't know all the songs. They wouldn't know what was going on. So I think there is that socialization that can
Mhm.
occur because everyone has immediate access to streaming services. That's a good question. I have to figure out what people are into. So I have
Mhm.
to be reading about music trends, and I have to be reading about technological trends as well. So part of that is part of my news feed, right? So I every morning I have a news feed that pops up on my devices here, and I'm very much into learning about music technologies. So I like to read a lot about what are some of the latest happenings, what are people into, what are people excited about as well. And I also love to talk to my students about that too. So I teach classes in entertainment and tourism communications, so quite often we come up with discussions about technology, discussions about the future, where are we going to go next, and sometimes that gets those ideas get those ideas come to fruition because of discussions I have with my students. For example, I did a whole study on cassette tape usage in millennials, and that was through a discussion I had with one of my classes from several years ago. I was talking about various music formats, and I said, "Oh yeah, and there's a cassette tape thing, but none of you ever used that." And a few hands went up, and they said, "Oh no, we're using cassette tapes." I'm going, "Oh really? Oh, so there is a contingent of the population here. Okay, so I need to dig a little further on that." So it's not just what I read in the news or what I'm reading online, but it's also talking to my students and finding out what are they into, because sometimes what they're into is going to be the next big thing or the next thing that's going to become popular. So I sometimes use them as a springboard for some of my ideas.